Hello, everybody. Welcome to Two Way tonight. I'm Mark Halperin. It's 5 o'clock here in the East as we come on with two great guests and some stories to deal with besides Iran, including the latest on Save Act, Save America Act, the president would prefer, I call it, and the current partial government shutdown. But we're going to spend, as we have been, the bulk of the evening on Iran. And I want to capture what I know as best I can, because that's part of my obligation to the two way community without violating any confidentiality with my sources. Um, I was joking in the pre-show here. It's very hard to report and host at the same time, or write stories at the same time. It's just very difficult to do. And I hosted a lot of shows today. This would be the fourth show of the day I've hosted. I had a couple meetings, and I'm developing some reporting, and I'm going to tell you where that stands. But it's big stuff, very big stuff. And maybe one of my sources will call me during the show, and we'll break it right here together. But I just want to talk about three strands that are going on with Iran right now that I think are just massive, and they're all connected. They're all connected. First of all, the showdown over the Strait of Hormuz and whether that'll be open or not. Uh, there's been a huge escalation on that today. There's been some confusion too about just how open it is, or theoretically. The Secretary of Energy tweeted that a ship had gone through and then deleted the tweet. The Iranians are threatening to mine it. The president's threatening to escalate the attacks on Iran if they do mine the Strait. The Chinese can't afford to have the Strait closed. They need oil from Iran. The Russians are loving this from an energy point of view because they're getting to sell their oil to places that have been trying to embargo them. So this question, not just of oil, but specifically of will oil move through the Strait, is just a massive story, and we'll talk about that. The second thing is, it is easy from the protected shores of this country to not really appreciate that war involves death and tragedy and suffering and kids being killed or displaced. Um, and there continues to be the story of the school that was attacked, and again continues to be the case that all logic and evidence suggests the United States accidentally bombed that school. But that story continues to be just a massive story about what happens during war, but just a tragedy. But I want to show you two New York Times headlines that, if it hasn't brought home to you that this is not a video game, as the White House sometimes casts it, but this is real life and death. I want to show you two New York Times headlines, and I urge you to read the stories. The first is about the bombing of Tehran. Tehran is a city, it's about the size of New York City, in terms of both the city itself and the metroplex. There's like 12 million people who live in the Tehran metroplex. Here's the headline from the New York Times, number two, please. And the Times has gotten interviews with people in Tehran. Uh, Here's the headline: Nothing will remain of Tehran, Iran says amid heavy bombing. Some residents described the strikes overnight Monday into Tuesday as among the worst they had experienced since the war started. And President or Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said this morning that today will be a heavier bombing day than yesterday. So you've got a city of millions of people where the U.S., no matter how much intelligence there is, no matter how much sophisticated targeting there is, civilians are being killed. And as the bombing expands, more civilians were being killed, and the government of Iran doesn't care. So this is a tragedy. What's happening, and just like happened in Iraq, we'll never know all the number of citizens and the stories of the citizens, innocent citizens, including children, who were killed by the United States government in service of a higher good. But we'll never know all those stories. But just you can tell from reading the New York Times story that the targeting now, no matter how much they try to make it focus on non-civilian buildings, it's going to kill civilians. And the story says the air quality, it's like living in acid rain, and they have services, and everybody's supposed to be in their homes. I don't know how good the bomb shelters are in Tehran, but not good enough for this. And then the second story from the New York Times, if you put that up, about refugees. Um, you know, the Israelis never waste a crisis, and the Israelis are mowing the lawn not just in Iran, but in Lebanon. The headline, New York Times, nearly 700,000 people flee Israeli strikes in Lebanon. Lebanese leaders and aid groups warned of a growing humanitarian crisis as Israel target Hezbollah. I don't know how many of those 700,000 are kids, but not none of them. Not none of them. Okay, so the war is implicated about a dozen countries, but just these two countries, uh, just just kids are being hurt and their lives are being destroyed or uprooted. Now, here's the third thing, and this is where I've been doing my reporting all day, and this is just a monster story. Um, you know, People think that the people around Donald Trump and Donald Trump haven't discussed the end game here, that they just started the war and didn't think, well, we'll figure out what happens. No, they have an idea. They've had an idea from the beginning. They just don't talk about it. And again, this implicates China. The president talked to Putin for an hour yesterday. Don't know what they talked about, but trust me, this is some high level stuff. Okay. The negotiations to end the Ukraine Russia war, remember when that was the war we were all focused on, I am told that those are very close to coming to fruition. Now, they could be more likely from the Iran situation or less, but that deal is ripe to be made. It's riper than it's ever been. Okay. Now, what's the other geopolitical story here that's below the radar? Mostly U.S. Israel. What's going on with U.S. and Israel? We know that it's been reported that the United States was not pleased with the Israeli targeting of certain types of targets, including energy and water desalination. We know that Jared Kushner and Witkoff were supposed to go. Steve Witkoff were supposed to go to Israel, and that was canceled. Was it canceled because everything's okay, or was it canceled because not everything's okay? Okay. Someone got mad at me the other day because I said the job of every American president regarding national security for the last several decades has been leverage over Putin, leverage over Xi, leverage over Bibi. And the person didn't like me lumping Bibi in with the others. I'm not saying Israel's the equivalent of China and Russia. What I'm saying is leverage over that guy is really complicated, really difficult to get, and really important to achieve American interests. And in this case, I'm just telling you, based on my reporting, and I wish I could be more specific, but I can't yet. There's big casino stuff going on right now with China and Russia and with Israel. Big stuff's going on that all derives from and radiates out from what's happening on the ground in Iran. But there's some big stuff brewing. And that's all I can say right now. I wish I could say more, but maybe I will during this hour. Maybe tomorrow morning. We'll see. All right. That's where things stand, ladies and gentlemen. This is a big thing that's happening here. So we're going to run through all of this with our guests. Mary Margaret Olohan of the Daily Wire is here. Julian Epstein is here, former Capitol Hill aide and Democratic strategist. And then we'd love to have your participation. If you want to be in on the conversation, please raise your hand. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, please don't put smack in the chat. Even during wartime, especially during wartime, peace, love, and understanding. Extend the presumption of grace to all, except maybe the Ayatollah. Oh, that's the other story I forgot to mention. I knew there was something else I wanted to mention. And I'll be curious to see what Mary Margaret knows about this. The new Ayatollah may be almost as dead as his dad. This is persistent in my inbox here and on Twitter. People are speculating it, but they may have picked a guy who's not really capable of leading the country, which would obviously be a massive story. Oh, and also the other thing I forgot, there may be talks. The president keeps referring to them, and then they keep being denied by the Iranians. There may be talks between the U.S. and Iran going on, maybe. So in a moment, our guests will be here. We'll talk about all these issues. We'll show you some of the latest sound bites from around the country and around the world. And then we'll get to your questions. So again, please raise your hand if you want to be in on the conversation. Quick word from some sponsors and then right into it. Cozy Earth will give you 20% off everything on the site. A good time of year to maybe freshen up everything. Do a little spring cleaning. Maybe you got hay fever like me. You want to replace towels and sheets and bedding and start afresh. 20% off. Go to cozyearth.com. Comfort, morning, noon, and night. Socks, pajamas, sheets, towels, the pants, the bubble cuddle blanket, all 20% off with the promo code two-way. Go to cozyearth.com right now and buy some essentials, buy some gifts. The socks, they're pushing the socks. 4 versatile styles. The 4 styles people like most in socks. I should do this as a quiz. What are the 4 styles, you ask? Calf, quarter, ankle, and no-show. Each pair crafted with care to fit seamlessly into your routine. I want the no-shows ones. I don't have those yet. I didn't know they had no-show socks. Discover how care in every detail transforms simple routines into moments of true comfort and ease. cozyearth.com, promo code two-way, 20% off right now. All right, the other sponsor I want to tell you about is our friends at fastgrowingtrees.com. Thrill of a lifetime the first time I got a tree in the mail. You order like deodorant or maybe some manga comic books. Sure, but imagine getting a tree in the mail. You can. Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery. Thousands of trees and plants. They have over 2 million happy customers, and if you count me, it's 2 million and one. They help you like an online nursery. They tell you, you tell them what you want, inside, outside, how many you want. They have a Live and Thrive guarantee. Promises your plants arrive happy and healthy. You don't need a green thumb. You just need to be able to open a box and stand the thing upright. Spring, of course, is a great time to start planning, to try things out. And once you get a tree in the mail, for some reason, at least for me, it feels more like a member of the family than if you go to a nursery and buy it. I don't know why that is. Maybe because opening the box was like just a new experience. Anyway, 20% off. Use the code two-way at checkout for 20% off everything on the site, fastgrowingtrees.com, code two-way. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. As Jackie Gleason would say, sort of. Mary Margaret, do you know who Jackie Gleason is? Do you know?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? All right. The older members of the community will say, well, that's a little depressing. He was a comedian. He had a very hit show called The Honeymooners. You've probably heard of that.
I have heard of that, yes.
Yeah, he was the star of The Honeymooners. Thank you for being here. I made you listen to my whole monologue. Thank you for coming on time. Thoughts on the issues I raised? Pick up on any of them you wish, and just free form on where you think things stand and what I got wrong, what I got right, what you want to ask me follow-ups on. All yours.
Well, first of all, I was intrigued by what you said about the new Ayatollah, because I was at Pete Hegseth's presser this morning. Feels like 4 days ago from all the things that have happened. But I was there this morning and I asked him if he knows the condition of the new leader of Iran. And he had a funny look on his face, Mark. I think he didn't totally know the answer, or he did, and he was worried about how he would phrase it. But at the end of the day, he said, that the new leader of Iran needs to listen to them, to back down immediately, and that he couldn't share the status of that individual or whether he was frankly alive or not. Yeah. But we did try and ask, we did try and get answers on that front. And we also, have been pressing the White House. We've been pressing the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth himself. I've gotten to ask him a number of questions in the last week about the status of different parts of this war. And frankly, Mark, I never thought I would be a war reporter, but here we are. That's what we're doing. And it's a crazy news cycle. I mean, look, we just had the president weighing in only minutes ago. We had Pete Hegseth saying only minutes ago that CENTCOM has been eliminating inactive mine-laying vessels, wiping them out with ruthless precision. The president weighing in on that as well. So just new developments pretty much every 5 minutes, it feels like, and nothing's slowing down.
Yeah, I watched the briefing live and I saw your question. I love the way you phrased it, because you made it almost impossible for him to have a poker face. And I read it the same way you did. Either he didn't know about the reports or he knows the guy is dead or maimed. And it was hard to tell which it was. But thank you for all that. And again, we'll get to some news a day besides what you already shared. Thank you for that. Julian, welcome in. Julian, of course, worked on Capitol Hill for many years as someone who could run investigative rings around Mr. Comer. Julian actually knew how to conduct investigations and is a keen observer of all of this. Julian, just your macro thoughts of where we are here on Tuesday, a week and a few days into this conflict.
Well, Mark, thanks for having me on, and it's nice to be with you and Mary. I am in a distinct minority in my party. I think this is a good and just war. I think what the president has done is legally justified. I think it's morally justified. I think what we're facing in Iran is the closest thing to a modern day version of Adolf Hitler. I think the Democratic plan on this has been very deficient in the sense that it is part of a diplomatic mindset in the last 3 decades that has failed. It basically has the view that you can accomplish the goals of the United States, the security goals, through the diplomatic process, because after all, the Ayatollahs are just like us. If you just give them cash, if you just give them respect and dignity, they will eventually come around to the rules-based order. This is when Obama said to the rest of the Arab countries, you just have to share the neighborhood with Iran. I think it is a set of ideas that has failed. And I think what Trump is doing here is hopefully, if it is successful, will be the most important political realignment that we've seen since the fall of the Berlin Wall. You mentioned China and Russia. I think it's very interesting that China and Russia have not really, for the most part, come to Iran's aid. They are looking at the formidable power of the U.S. and Israeli air capacity, and they have decided to step back. If that isn't a shot over the bow for what Russia might be thinking in the future, what China might be thinking in the future, I don't know what is. So I think that's been very significant. I think the other point that's related is that this may be doing more to strengthen the Abraham alliance than anyone could have predicted. If you see all the Gulf states now are coming to the side of the United States and getting engaged because they've been attacked by Iran, I think that is also significant. The thing I worry about most is the sort of the isolationists on the Republican side and the Democratic Party, for the most part, trying to undermine Trump with the goal of ending this thing short. Those people are the useful idiots of the Iranian regime. What Iran is counting on is that the United States will not be able to succeed in its objectives, which I think are clear, because the public will become scared because of economic issues and oil prices. And they will have a weak stomach for this kind of thing. And I think sort of the isolationists on the right, and for the most part, the Democratic Party writ large, is playing into this in a very, very unhelpful way. I don't think there is an option to this. I think the threat of Iranian ballistic capacity as a shield for rebuilding the nuclear is real. I don't think there's a diplomatic answer to that. So I think on the whole, what Trump is doing is very good. And I think the detractors have been wrong on most of the facts, wrong on the law, and very unhelpful to the national security goals of this country.
Thank you for that. Thank you all for being here. Great overviews from both of you. Let's run through some headlines. Again, raise your hand if you want to get in on the conversation. Let's put up the thing Mary Margaret referred to, which is the president saying that, and Pete Hegseth both talking about the destruction of these game, I'll say cat and mouse, maybe that's too glib, of attempts to mine the Gulf. Go ahead and put those up, or the Straits rather. Go ahead, Strait. Go ahead and put that up. Number 6A, I believe it is. This is, here we go. Truth Social, just a little bit a while ago, the last hour. If Iran had put any mines out in the Hormuz Strait, and we have no reports of them doing so, we want them removed immediately. If for any reason mines were placed and they are not removed forthwith, the military consequences to Iran will be at a level never seen before. If, on the other hand, they remove what may have been placed, it will be a giant step in the right direction. Additionally, we are using the same technology and missile capabilities deployed against drug traffickers to permanently eliminate any boat or ship attempting to mine the Strait. They will be dealt with quickly and violently. Beware, President Donald J. Trump. I don't think the president's going to drop a nuclear weapon on them. But the United States has some formidable weapons that have not been used in this conflict so far. And I think the president's trying to send a signal to the Iranians that they can be hit worse than they have been. Number 4, please. Oil prices, even as there's this conflict over the Strait continues, oil prices had declined today. You can see the graph there if you're watching on video. Oil prices decline as mood improves on Wall Street. Sigh of relief from people in the financial world today. First of all, because of the president's remarks yesterday, giving them confidence that the conflict may be misplaced, but conflict will not go on. And it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If benchmark crude drops more than 11%, which it did, it's going to make everybody feel a little bit better. CNN was the first to report, I believe, number 5, this concept, although CBS reported it true too. U.S. intelligence says that Iran is laying mines in the Strait, even though the president said the U.S. doesn't know about that. It was based, both CBS and CNN were based on intelligence reports. Caroline Levitt sent the same message that the president did at her briefing this afternoon, that the Iranians better not obstruct the free flow of energy. Number 7, please.
Trump reiterated his commitment toward keeping oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz so the United States and all of our allies can receive their energy needs. President Trump will not allow rogue Iranian terrorists to stop the freedom of navigation and the free flow of energy. Let me be clear. It is a good thing to wipe out terrorists who indiscriminately target civilians and attempt to hold the global economy hostage. And President Trump should be commended for doing so. As the president made unequivocally clear to the remaining elements of this terrorist regime in his statement yesterday, if they do anything to stop the flow of oil or goods within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the world's most powerful military 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. Moving forward, the stated objectives for Operation Epic Fury remain the same: destroy the terrorist regime's ballistic missiles, raise their Iranian missile industry to the ground, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, and ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. President Trump remains confident these goals will be accomplished in swift fashion.
Mary Margaret, what's the mood like in the briefing room before, during, and after the briefings at the Pentagon? Is it tense? Is it business as usual? How does it feel in there?
Well, Mark, we had 2 briefings today, one at the White House and one at the Pentagon. As you know, we just saw that clip from Caroline. And I think the mood is a little different in both places. The Pentagon, as you know, is just incredibly on time, very disciplined. You don't get a lot from these people other than what you're supposed to get. And at the same time, obviously, there's a lot of restrictions on the press there. So they're very, very clear on who's supposed to go into the briefing room, who's not. They have bans that they're checking on every single reporter that's in there. And so what you see is kind of what you get. You know, you ask Hegseth the question, he may answer it. He may tell you that you're not supposed to know that and then move on. At the White House, on the other hand, you know, there's a little more tension in the air. You can see, as my colleague and my friend Shelby Talcott, who works for Semaphore, just reported, there's actually some back and forth dynamics about how the White House should be messaging on the possibility of terrorism in the United States. There's a lot of consternation between administration officials about how they should be approaching that or how they shouldn't. There's also, you know, an acknowledgement, a reality at the White House that they can't be putting out too much information about this war because A, they don't always have it, and B, they might be supposed to come from the Pentagon or from the president himself. So it's a really interesting situation for, I think, comms officials in general to navigate. But at the same time, look, Caroline is posturing confidence. The president is posturing confidence. Right after the president posted that Truth Social that you showed earlier, he posted another one. About 15 minutes later, he says, "I'm pleased to report that within the last few hours, we have hit and completely destroyed 10 inactive mine-laying boats and or ships, with more to follow." So nothing is ceasing in this war. We constantly have new updates. And for the president's part, he is confident, he is excited, he is happy to see how things are going. And that's really the attitude we're receiving from him across the board over the last couple of weeks.
Thank you for that. Julian, I listened so closely to members of your party who, as you pointed out, the vast majority of whom seem to be openly opposed to the war and even to the success of the war. I hate to say that, but it really, that's the tone of it.
Agree.
And I listen closely. There's some objections like failure to consult with Congress that I take very seriously. There's some objections like, what's the end game? Killing of civilians, assassinating foreign leaders. These are all things that should be debated. But the hysteria in some quarters over simply an effort to take the first path any president has taken to truly eradicate Iran's capabilities to do mass destruction seems a little off key to me. I'm not sure if they'll pay a political price for it or not. Here's Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut. After getting a briefing, the Democrats have been uniformly upset by what they say are briefings that raise more questions than they answer. Here's Senator Blumenthal talking about how he felt about the briefing they got this morning. from administration officials on the war. Number 11, please.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. I am left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war. My questions have been unanswered, and I will demand answers because the American people deserve to know. And I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here. And there is also, as disturbingly as anything else, the specter of active Russian aid to Iran, putting in danger American lives. Literally, Russia seems to be aiding our enemy actively and intensively with intelligence and perhaps with other means. And China also may be assisting Iran. So the American people deserve to know much more than this administration has told them about the cost of the war, the danger to our sons and daughters in uniform, and the potential for further escalation and widening of this war, a war of choice made by this president, not chosen by the American people, with potentially huge consequences to American lives.
Okay, so Julian, you've dealt with members of Congress for years. I want to understand how this is thought about in the minds of Democrats. Maybe it's not the same for everyone. Embedded in that time we spent with Senator Blumenthal are three things. One, he raised some legitimate questions. The question of the cost to the taxpayer for a war initiated by the executive branch is a very legitimate thing to me. It's a very legitimate thing because he needs at a minimum to be a good steward of my tax dollars. Legitimate. Number two, talking about, the ground war and our sons and daughters, that seems to me to be just made up. There's no indication there's going to be a ground war. And then the overall tone, not a word. Now, we only showed 2 minutes. Maybe he said it elsewhere. But embedded in the tone of that is not, of course, we want America to succeed. Of course, Iran is evil. Of course, the president should be commended for taking the initiative here. So how does that happen? Because all the Democrats, 95% of the Democratic members of Congress are exactly like that. So how does that happen? Are they talking about message discipline? Are they all genuinely outraged? Is it to politically embarrass the president? Where, from whence does it emanate that they all sound exactly the same?
Look, I think one thing we know about the Democratic Party is groupthink. Another thing is that we know it has moved so far to the left on the American political spectrum in the last 20, 25 years. When I worked with them, at least half of the party would have probably supported some kind of action like this. In fact, most of the political polarization we're seeing in the United States right now is because the Democratic Party has moved so far left. Republicans have basically stayed the same the last 20, 25 years. I think I said this on the show last time. If you did a Venn diagram of Clinton's positions and everything from domestic, cultural, foreign affairs issues, Clinton's positions and Trump's positions, you would find an enormous amount of overlap. So the party has moved very, very far left. I think it is satisfying an increasingly socialist activist base that has a weird reluctance to criticize Iran or any gross human rights abuses that are going on in the Arab world, the Islam world. And I think the party has lost a lot of its moral center. I think that the question to ask to the senator is, what is your plan? If this is not the right plan, what is your plan for containing Iran? Because we know the diplomatic approach hasn't worked. We know that Iran played Obama and Biden as chumps. Even during the Obama administration, during the JCPOA, Iran vigorously pursued its nuclear program. They pursued advanced centrifuges. They were enriching uranium up to a point. They could certainly turn on the spigot the moment they would walk away from a deal. All of the technology was being developed. The ballistics was being developed. The terror armies and Hezbollah, Hamas, they were all being, formidably prosecuted. So I think the question to the Democrats is, what is your plan? Iran is the tip of the spear of the revisionist powers. The revisionist powers being China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And the revisionist powers, their main goal is to destroy the West, and certainly to displace the primacy of the West. And Iran being the tip of the spear through not just the capacity to threaten the world with nuclear arms, which would give it a broad swath to do bad things. But the ballistics capability, I think, is not properly understood. The ballistics capability that Iran has is mind-blowing in terms of what it could do in the region. And they are looking to get a capability that no Iron Dome can defend. And so we're up against something that's very, very serious, Mark. And one of the reasons that Democrats like me, the centrist Democrats who are left, the very few of us who are left, others like Mark Penn and maybe a couple others, are so frustrated because the Democrats don't seem to be taking this issue seriously. They seem to be coddling a far left activist base that has become strangely tolerant of abuses that are going on in the Islamic world, and strangely silent on the 30,000 people that were murdered. You didn't hear anyone at the Grammys talking about the 30,000 that were murdered, 30,000 Iranians that were murdered, or anything that's happening in Yemen or Sudan or Syria. Right. The left is remarkably silent on all of these things. So it's when we hear about the pro-Palestinian movement, I don't think it's a concern that movement has for Arabs that are being injured and mistreated and hurt in the war. I think a lot of it is, at least by the leadership, an organized effort to take down the West. And I think there are people that just have to see this more clearly. And I think the Democratic Party doesn't, because it is losing working class voters and it is doing everything it can to keep energy, which is all coming from the progressive left. So I think there's that. And again, I think the fundamental question here is, it's fine to debate costs. It's fine to debate war powers. I think the War Powers Act was complied with. I think Congress was consulted. There's a 60-day time period. All of these issues are fine, but they're secondary. And the reason I think they're secondary is because the potential cost to the United States here of not dealing with the Iran threat outstrip all of these concerns. So if you want to say that Trump is being a bad guy and being abusive and authoritarian, fine. What is your plan? And they don't. In fact, I haven't heard any Democrat in the last 5 years articulate a coherent idea of what global security ought to look like. Right. There isn't one. Biden was a complete catastrophe in the Mideast.
Including in this specific question. Mary Margaret, 2 poly markets I want to show you. We've looked at these over the last few days, but here's the update. 13, please. Will the U.S. invade Iran by the end of the month? Will there be a U.S. military presence on the ground in Iran by the end of the month? And down to 10%, 10% chance. You can see it's been significantly higher, down to 10%. Maybe the president's words yesterday played a role there. And then Polymarket, another question. Will the regime fall by June 30th? Number 14. Will the regime fall by June 30th? And 22% chance the Iranian regime will fall by June 30th. Mary Margaret, what do you think of this debate put in sharp relief by the Quinnipiac poll that showed the country does not think the president's explained enough? Do you think that the White House feels that now, and that we'll be seeing more explanations from the president about the reasons for this war?
Yeah, I think whether or not the White House agrees with that, because they'll tell you that they have explained extensively, whether or not they agree with it, they're going to be explaining even more. And I think we'll also see more of these videos that we've already seen a lot of, that I think you referred to, Mark, as video game type videos. The White House is very strategic with how they use digital media, digital strategy. They know what they're doing. They know what will reach the public. And so especially with those types of videos, those, I believe, are intended to reach young men and to show young men what's going on, to help people understand what's going on in Iran, and also to kind of bolster this patriotic military spirit, which Pete Hegseth and the president have both been very adamant in doing. You know, they want people to be rah-rah America on this. They want people to understand that this is a glorious time to be an American. You can do that. I think many Americans do believe this, but at the same time, we also have fallen American soldiers coming home. We have families mourning them. And that is a very hard double screen to look at for the president, for Pete Hegseth, for most Americans, for myself. You know, I'm sitting there, we're hearing about these fallen American soldiers coming home, and Pete Hegseth speaking to the parents. It's just absolutely soul crushing to hear about these men and women coming home who, you know, probably never thought that this would happen. So absolutely, the president is going to have a lot of explaining to do to the public. The White House is also going to have a lot of explaining to do. I think a lot of Americans, if this conflict ends soon, this could absolutely play out in the president's favor. Obviously, if it's a successful end to the conflict, which it looks like it will be, the president will boast of this and will be talking about it for many days to come. The White House will be also talking about it for many days to come. There's always a chance that something unfortunate will happen in the meantime, and God forbid that it does. That's something that the president will have to handle as well. But right now, it looks like, you know, as I said before, he's incredibly confident. He feels that things are going well. They are going well for him for the most part. I think his biggest complaint would be the legacy media coverage of the conflict, and then the real legitimate absolute tragedy of these lost American lives. And that, I think, is his biggest I don't even want to call it a hurdle. It's his biggest the biggest thing in his path that he will have to grapple with.
Can I get in on that, Mark?
Yeah, sure.
So I completely agree with Mary Margaret about the legacy media coverage. I turn on the left-wing cable networks at night, and what I hear them talking about is War Powers Act that they don't understand. They start talking about sort of the consultant process, which they don't. It's like they haven't read the statutes. It's really, really the level of discourse that I hear is really bad. And even in the New York Times and Washington Post, I find the coverage so slanted on this. I do not hear them talking about the significance and the nature of the threat, what the ballistics, nuclear, surrogate army intentions are, and how they are the tip of the spear on the revisionist force that is looking to destroy the West. And I think the legacy media has really, really fallen down on its job, and it's a major cultural change we've seen in the last 20 years. Now, the only point I want to quibble with Mary Margaret, who's otherwise, her overview was just superb, is the question of success. What does success mean? And I think the Trump administration has done a reasonably good job of defining it, but I don't think it's defined it as well. As far as I can see it, Mark, there are three scenarios by which this thing ends. There's the cold feet scenario, where the Trump administration gets cold feet because of the political pressure, the polling, and the pressure on the right to pull out early, not get the job done, the way George Herbert Walker Bush did in 1991. Which was historians look back and say that was a big mistake. And in that scenario, Trump does a huge amount of damage to nuclear, ballistics, the terrorist armies, and decapitates all the leadership. But the regime stays in place. And they retain, when you talk about the Strait of Hormuz, why I think that's a useful way of thinking about this. Iran's strategy is a veto power right now. If they can shut down shipping lanes, they can limit the amount of damage and they can survive. And they can say to the world, hey, we have veto power. And the Americans were not able to defeat that. They did take out our nuclear, ballistics, and their terrorist armies. But we have veto power by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which we can still use. And so that's the first scenario, which I don't think is a successful scenario. The second scenario is that the U.S. and the Israel can do so much damage to that veto power, the ability of the Iranians to shut down the Strait of Hormuz and other shipping lanes by kinetic activity and by threats, that Iran backs down on that. I think that's a middle ground scenario.
Just do number three quick, because I want to get to hands real quick. So
sure, the number three scenario is regime change.
Yeah, and getting the oil. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk about the SAVE Act and a few other topics, but I want to get to your questions. Maybe we'll hit some other topics towards the end of the program. But for now, if you want to be in on the conversation with Mary Margaret and Julian, please raise your hand. Come on in, unmute, tell us where you are and what's on your mind for our guests. Start with Yakov in Brooklyn. Welcome in, sir. What's on your mind?
Hi, good afternoon. So talking about war is not a game and is deadly serious. What do Americans do if a regime that does not only not care about the destruction of their country, but welcomes it, starts to lob missiles at America? What's the plan? I know it might be a far-fetched scenario, but no, people in the Gulf states also thought it was a far-fetched scenario until this war happened.
You mean launch missiles from Iran into the United States?
Hell yeah, yes.
I don't think they have the capacity to do that.
They don't now.
But they're working on it.
Yeah.
But they're working on it.
And that's the whole point is that's the goal of this war.
Yeah.
Yakov, they don't have intercontinental capacity yet, but it's an excellent question because they're working on it. And that is, again, to Mary Margaret's excellent point about the legacy media, that is a threat that the legacy media has not covered. They do have, and I know this because I have done some work with organizations that are active in this area, I am relatively confident on good source that they have sleeper cells inside the United States. And what we saw in New York the other day with the attacks, the attempted attacks, by the political Islamists, the radical Islamists, I'm being told that there are sleeper cells that are using that exact type of bomb or developing that exact type of bomb, and that are looking to create terrorist acts here. So the threat on the homeland is real.
Yeah, Mary Margaret.
Absolutely. I mean, look, those two guys that were charged by the DOJ yesterday in New York City for this attempted bombing, they literally said in the DOJ complaint that they hoped to kill more people than the Boston bombing killed. And they lamented that it only killed 3 people. So the Boston Marathon bombing. That gave me chills when I read it, and it gave me chills when I said it just now, because that is a very possible reality for the coming weeks and days in the United States. As many of the Trump administration officials have lamented in the past, we have not just an illegal immigration problem, but an immigration problem where there are many individuals in our country who do not like the United States of America, who harbor ISIS sympathies, who harbor ill will against Americans. And so I think it's a very real and very scary reality, and something that, we've been pestering the White House about, and we want to know from the FBI, from DHS, from all these agencies, what is being done to counteract these threats, which Caroline Leavitt said today are being counteracted even if we don't know about it.
Yakov, thank you. Grateful to you for the question. Wendy, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Mary Margaret and Julian.
I'm in the Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area in Minnesota. And I don't really have a question, but you might want to comment on something I want to share. There's a Iraqi immigrant business owner in a place where I go into commonly, and we always talk politics. He's a big Trumper, but I asked him today, first time I've seen him since the war started, and I asked him what he thinks. And I was fascinated to hear that he is in total support of the war, that he left Iraq after the first war in 2003, after Bush's war, and his family fled to Syria, other Arab nations, and eventually got to the United States. They're citizens now, and so on. Very prosperous small business owners. So he is very in favor of this, and he shared some things with me that about how brutal and dangerous, and all the other words, that the Iran regime is for the entire area. And he explained a lot of things to me about the Sunnis and the Shia, and a lot of stuff I've read before. But he talked about the torture and the imprisoning of people, and the militias that Iran sends into all of these other countries, and how dangerous it is even to be an Iraqi citizen in Iraq unless you follow that crazy part of the religion that the mullahs.
Wendy, let's let our guest comment. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mary Margaret, thoughts on the fact that Iran has been the least popular member of the neighborhood, with lots of countries, some of whom were intimidated, and some like the Saudis and the Israelis who've wanted them gone for a while.
Yeah, Wendy, I think it's a great point to raise, and it's something that I wish we would hear more of. Like we've been saying during the show today, we don't hear enough about what is going on over there and the injustices and the terrifying lives that many of these people live, because the legacy media is not necessarily interested in telling these stories. And so especially now, as we look at the media landscape, unfortunately for the White House press corps, a lot of news is not really considered interesting unless it's negative about the president and negative about what the president is doing. So I think if we had a more unbiased press, we might see more of this in the coverage of this war and the injustices that the Iranian people themselves have had to deal with. But sadly, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's Julian.
I think if you were to poll most people in the region, they would be for what Trump is doing. I think every Iranian American I know in the United States is completely behind it. I think it also does raise the question of the political left. How is it that the political left joins forces with the Free Palestine movement when it is a so-called, human rights movement for the Arabs, when that ideology of that movement is anti-Western? But how is it that the West is completely silent when it comes to the 30,000 people murdered in Iran, when it comes to everything, as I said before, it's happening in Sudan, Syria, Lebanon, everywhere else? How is it that when the effort to liberate Arabs from violent oppression, when that does not fit with anti-Western ideology, that the left becomes entirely silent? To me, that's a scandal.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you. Let me get a quick message in, and then back to your questions. Please raise your hand if you want in. If you got insurance, health insurance, oftentimes your policy will cover prescriptions, and you might pay nothing or $1 or $2 or $10. But we've all had the experience where something's not covered, and it's sticker shock. It's an extraordinary amount of money. The solution for that is super.com/RX. Go to super.com/RX and up to 85% off your prescriptions. Go there right now and see, avoid the sticker shock. You can get up to 85% off. A lot of people use it as a life hack for prescription prices. Go to superrx.com and, super.com/RX. Super.com/RX for 85% off. It's available to be used at all the chain pharmacies around the country, over 74,000. No surprises. You just search the drug that you take and see what the price is using it. It's not a coupon. It's a membership designed to put money back in your pocket. Go to super.com/RX to see how much you can save. Rick, welcome in. Thank you for being part of Two-Way. Unmute, tell folks where you are who don't know and what's on your mind for Julian and for Mary Margaret.
Thank you, Mark. Just two quick things. One, it sometimes appears to me, and I'm interested in your experts' opinions, that Israel and the United States have two, and I'm talking about governments now, have two completely different filters on this war. To Israel, this is now or never, and the effect is so immediate to them and long lasting. And I'm not sure that we the general writ large feel that way because we're so far away.
Okay, do your second one, and then they'll respond to both.
I forgot it.
Okay, Mary Margaret, how do you think both the government and the people, the urgency in Israel because of geography and targeting? How would you describe the differences?
Well, I mean, Israel obviously is geographically closer and in a much more dangerous place than the United States is, but the president of the United States, President Donald Trump, has argued repeatedly and more aggressively in recent days that he had reason to believe that Iran would strike first and we would be in danger as well if he hadn't taken action. So look, this is a situation where obviously Israel might have felt the need to move more quickly than we did. But President Trump has said, I think he even said in the last couple of days that he believed Iran would strike within 7 days, within 3 days. There was a little bit of haggling over that at the press briefing today, but be that as it may, he believed Iran would strike soon. Now, the American people, I don't know that that was on their radar necessarily, but now it is. And so I think that's kind of how we have to move forward.
Yeah, Julian.
Well, Rick, it's an excellent question. Thank you for it. I think Israel is a lot closer to it, and the threat is much more existential. So I think they're going to be more finely attuned. Whether the American people are attuned or not, the reality is that Iran was building 30 mega ballistic missiles a month. And the capacity soon was going to outstrip any ability to take those missiles down through the Iron Dome or any defensive. So they would quickly have prohibitive escalatory power within a year, perhaps. And then it would have been very, very difficult for us to have taken action on them. And that's why I think the threat was imminent.
I totally agree with that. I have 3 grandchildren, and in 5 years, they'll be 11, 9, and 7. And to me, that's pretty damn imminent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick, thank you. Well said and great question. Appreciate it. Okay, Michael, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for our guests.
Hey, how's it going? Michael from Houston. One comment, one question. The comment is just that, you know, when we invaded Iraq, there was a huge surge of patriotism, and everyone was supportive and behind it. And then Bush thought that war was going to last 3 weeks, and then it didn't. So I just want to make that comment. The question is, it seems like the interest of Israel and the U.S. might be a little different here in terms of regime change. What happens if the 4 goals that Caroline Leavitt described are accomplished, yet Israel's goal of really wanting a different regime who doesn't want to destroy them is not accomplished, and those interests diverge? It doesn't seem like we really have control of Israel. They're their own country. So what would happen then?
Great question. Great question. Julian.
I think Iraq and Iran are very different. I think Iran has a much longer history of a mercantile, middle class, educated class, and I think they are all yearning to be free from the yoke of the Iranian rule. I think in Iraq it was very different because of the sectarianism that existed there. I also think if there's going to be regime change, it'll be much different. It won't be a prolonged occupation with U.S. forces. There are other forces that could do it. It's a sort of a complicated conversation that's a little bit difficult to get into. It involves the Kurds and the Persians and sort of the different groups, but all of whom I think could ally. Very, very different situation from Iraq for that reason as well. I think also, you know, we talk about the public fatigue. I think the thing to think about is what is the right thing? I mean, to the previous question, you're looking at a power that Iran could have in a year where they would have prohibitive retaliatory escalatory power that would make it very difficult for us to defeat the nuclear ambitions. So I think, you know, sure, there's a public opinion issue of this. There's also a national security conversation. What is the right thing for us to do? And if we don't do it now, when? And if we don't do it, you know, today, this next year, what's the alternative plan? Because I haven't heard one.
Yeah. Mary Margaret.
You know, all I would add is that the president and Pete Hegseth have both been very strong in telling the whole world that whatever happens next in Iran will be in American interest. I thought that was really interesting. I believe it was this morning at the presser with Pete Hegseth. He was very emphatic that whatever happens next, it will be in our interests. He did not say Israel. He said American interest. So that's very interesting to me, and I'm watching that closely.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Great question. I want to get one more thing in on a totally different topic. New episode of Next Up dropped a little while ago, and it includes my latest 8 for 28, most likely Democratic presidential nominees in 2 years. Eager to see what you all think. These are the February rankings, number 23. Just to remind everybody where I had people rated. This was number 23, please. February. The top of the ratings, most likely nominees. Again, this isn't about the general election. It's just about nomination. This February, Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, Pritzker, Harris, Ocasio-Cortez, Buttigieg, Emmanuel, Kelly. And here are the new March rankings unveiled today. The 8 remain the same, but the order beyond the top 3 has switched up. And here you can see I've moved Pete Buttigieg up, Kamala Harris down, Mark Kelly up, Rahm Emanuel stays the same, and AOC in danger of falling off the list down to 8. Julian, you first. Thoughts on these rankings? Most likely Democratic nominees. Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Who's not on there you think should be?
I would move Gavin Newsom down. I think he is going to be a Roman candle. I think every time he opens his mouth, he embarrasses himself. I think he is much more of a lightweight than the party establishment sees. I think what the party needs, what I want to see, is somebody like Josh Shapiro. He's a centrist. He's pro-Israel. He's been on things like school choice. That's the kind of thing that the party needs. I think the message that Rahm Emanuel has been making, although I don't think he's a first-tier candidate, is exactly where the party needs to go. You see in the NBC poll and in the Manhattan Institute, all of the data showing that the voters are far to the right of the median voter is far to the right of where the activist base and the Democrats. And unless they make that shift, I think they're gonna have the same result in 2028.
Yeah, Mary Margaret, who would you move up or down?
I'd have to say I'd move Pete Buttigieg up, and I always mispronounce his name, and I've been saying it for almost a decade now. I think every other week, maybe it's about once a month now, we see a different media profile that kind of tries to suss out Pete Buttigieg and what his allure on the national stage is, and they usually decide it for him. That to me is a good sign that at least he has support from within the party. AOC had a rough month last month. It's not surprising to me that she's down on your list. I'm surprised that Gretchen Whitmer isn't on there. I still have a strong feeling that she's going to be a good contender, but she didn't make the list, so I don't know.
Well, she's not on the list because I don't think she's going to run, and I got to factor that in. If I don't think somebody's going to run, I can't say they're likely to be the nominee. I agree with you about Buttigieg. I would have made him number 4, or number 3 rather, but I got serious pushback from my sources. But my main argument for putting him high, even though I talked to about 30 strategists, mostly Democrats, some Republicans. Some people didn't have Buttigieg on their list at all, and said he shouldn't be as high as even 4. I'll say this: here's the thing about everybody on that list. Only one person has won a primary or caucus running for president on that list, and that's Pete Buttigieg, who won the Iowa caucuses 6 years ago. Winning the Iowa caucuses is not easy, folks. Everybody who was running that year, with 1 or 2 exceptions, wanted to win the Iowa caucuses. Bernie wanted to win. Joe Biden wanted to win. Only one person won the Iowa caucuses. And by the way, in the New Hampshire primary, a few days later, Pete Buttigieg got 4 times the votes as Joe Biden did. 4 times the votes, and finished a close second behind Sanders. So, you can list all the reasons Buttigieg is a flawed candidate, but one person has won a primary or a caucus, and that's him. And that's not an easy thing to do. My full explanation of the rankings is available now on Next Up. You can watch it on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast, and also talk to Politico's Josh Gerstein about the Supreme Court and some of my latest reporting on Iran, available now. Go to YouTube channel. It's Next Up Halperin. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, be back with the morning meeting. And this program will be on again in 23 hours or so. So we'll see you here tomorrow night. Mary Margaret, I'd love for you to close by saying, what are your top sort of questions you're wondering about in the next 24 hours? Is it about the Strait? Is it about Russia? Where is your focus for the next 24 hours?
Well, I asked about Russia this morning, so I'm focused more on in the coming days on the United States, actually, on terrorism, on getting answers, because I think that the public deserves to have them.
Yeah. Julian, where's your focus here, home and abroad, related to the Iran conflict?
Strait of Hormuz will tell you whether Iran thinks it can escalate.
Yeah. I don't understand why China is not insisting it be opened. That's confusing to me. They need the oil, and Iran's their ally, and yet for some reason they don't seem to have the requisite leverage there, assuming they're trying. Grateful to both Mary Margaret and Julian for being here. Mary Margaret, remind folks where they can read your work.
You can read my work at dailywire.com and follow me, Mary Margaret Olohan, on X.
All right. And Julian, where can people see your stuff?
Julian Epstein at Julian Epstein on X, and I write pretty regularly for the New York Post as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all for being part of the community. Very grateful to you again. Be back here tomorrow night and tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, for the morning meeting. Have a very good and safe evening, everybody.